listening to the Trash Talk Fantasy Football Podcast with your hosts, Angelo Sandone, Mike Surratt, and Mario Maniaci. Like and subscribe, motherfuckers.
What up, yo? It's your host with the most, Angelo Sandone, with the Trash Talk Fantasy Football Podcast. We're doing something a little different today. We are doing an IGTV exclusive segment. You won't be able to get this content from us anywhere else. We're only doing it for our fans on Instagram. So today I'm joined by Steve Rippy, aka Fantasy Guides on Instagram, and we're going to go over the top trading tips for fantasy football this year. Steve, how you doing, my brother?
I'm great, Angelo. Excited to be on the show. Really appreciate the invite.
For sure. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, dude. I've been watching football since I can remember. Big Broncos fan. I live in Denver. And I've been doing fantasy football since 2006. I remember my first draft pick. It was Sean Alexander, and it was a horrible pick. It was the year after his MVP season when he carried the ball like 1,000 times. And
I actually made that same exact pickup in one of my first money leagues, so I feel your pain there for sure.
It was my first one as a money league, and he hurt his foot, like a Liz Frank or something, or broke a bone in his foot, and he basically was worthless the entire season, and it didn't go so well, but I just remember I had a blast at it, and I was like hooked like instantly, so
that's
been
awesome,
doing it ever
man.
since. Yeah,
it's the love of the sport. It's the love of the sport. So guys, how awesome is this? Steve's in Colorado and I'm in New Jersey, and we're using cleanfeed.net, which brings you live audio in high definition with anyone in the world. Best part, it's completely free. So whether you're a podcaster or a business professional, cleanfeed.net has got you guys covered in the internet conferencing world. So Steve, I texted him about it today. We decided to do this segment, and I told him to download cleanfeed.net. Dude, how simple was it?
It was very easy. Literally all it was like my email, my name, and I was set up in about 30 seconds. It was awesome.
Yeah, click and record. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. We are here to talk about our top 8 trading tips, because drafting is great and it takes you a lot of great places to set your season up for a championship. But inside the season, you're going to really need to know the waiver wire and how to trade. So the first big rule when you're thinking about trading is, do you actually need to trade? So you got to ask yourself, what am I doing this for? What is the hole in the lineup that I'm trying to fill? And is there an easier option on the waiver wire? If the answer is that you need a wide receiver and there's not a decent option on the waiver wire, then it's time to start looking for a trade partner.
We have this idea of how our draft is going to go, and we have players that we're targeting, and we don't always get those players. We get some of them, but we don't get all of them. A lot of times what I find is, there'll be a player that I don't expect to be in a certain spot. Maybe it's a tight end, and I already have a tight end, but I can't pass up that player. If a player that has fallen in ADP is there and is just too good of a value, I'll take that player. He's a guy that I'm like, all right, well now I have a possible move I can make, post-draft, for instance. That's where I look for those kind of deals later after the draft.
Which is perfect, too, because then rule number 2 is know your league. Figure out which team in your league has a position you don't have. But more importantly, know who on your team can help their team enough that they'd be willing to do the deal. Remember, you're offering them this trade, so you want to give them like a bit of an impressive deal. Like, you have to be able to grab their attention. You know what I mean? If the deal doesn't make each team better, then it doesn't make sense. So along with which teams you match up with in a trade, you also have to make sure you're not like helping them out. as much as you want to help your team out, they might wind up playing you again in the future, or even worse, in the playoffs.
That's the good and the bad of it. There might be a perfect situation that's sitting out there, a player, maybe he's got, more running backs than he can start, and you're hurting at a running back, but you've got too many wide receivers. But then you look at that player and you're like, oh man, they're in my division, or they got a good team and I want to play them, the first game of the playoffs. So you kind of have to evaluate that. You got to really kind of look ahead. And it doesn't mean I won't do that trade, but I definitely have to think about it ahead of time.
Well, that happens all the time for sure. You have to know where the balance is in your league. So I'm in a keeper league. I know you're a big dynasty guy as well.
Oh, I love it.
So
yeah.
I'm in a keeper league, and I have a ton of great talent. I drafted a monster team last year. I'm not here to brag. Toot though. I am going to beat my own horn. But somebody said, hey, listen, we can only keep 2 players. You have like 8 really good players. How about I trade you Ezekiel Elliott for DeAndre Hopkins and Pat Mahomes? Because you're not going to keep them 2 players anyway. So I'm like, well, man, Zeke's a surefire thing. Obviously, this was prior to the suspension news, but Zeke's a surefire thing, man. Maybe I do this. But this guy is so good. I know if I give him Pat Mahomes and DeAndre Hopkins, he's going to build a monster around that. He's going to go running back heavy initially and then pick some really great talent at the end of the draft in trades and off the waiver wire. So you got to know your league. You can't make that trade with a guy like that.
Yeah, and you'd probably agree with me. I tend to try to be on the side where I'm getting in your scenario, the Zeke. I try to be the one that's giving up 2 players to get the stud. Doesn't mean I won't do it the other way. One of the things, that I don't do is I don't usually accept trades where it's like a 3-for-1,
Right. Because it's garbage. You're getting 3 piles of garbage for one.
Yeah, or it might, they have all these calculators out there, and you can look it up, and it might be even. It's like these 3 players are worth, a third of of Zeke, but they add up to Zeke. Well, yeah, that's all good, but I can easily find that third player on the waiver wire,
right.
And the other ones aren't giving me league winning upside. And I always try to get that player that's got that league winning upside, And I get it, like the example you're just giving with D-Hop and Mahomes. I mean, if somebody sends me D-Hop and Mahomes, I'm instantly already looking, how can I move Mahomes?
Right,
so
right.
I know what you mean.
But speaking of that 3-for-1 deal, perfect segue to rule number 3: don't be the bogus trade guy. So every league, correct me if I'm wrong here, but every league has that one guy, the guy who wants to send you a bag of donuts and a hot coffee for Saquon Barkley. One thing I can promise is that if you do that too much, your future offers are going to be overlooked, undervalued, and probably even worse, just like kind of ignored altogether, because no one's going to want to hear what you have to say. Like, it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've all got them. You get these offers, and they'll even sell it to you like it's a good offer. Like, hey, you're hurting at running back, so they try to send you a shitty running back that's, attached to, mid-level wide receiver, making it sound like it's a good deal, and it's terrible. And then they're the ones that also, it kind of goes with what you're saying. You don't have to win every trade. It really should be something where both teams are benefiting from it. And
Right.
when you get those offers where it's like, dude, it's not even close. And usually those people send those kind of offers all the time. And you don't want to be that guy, because your league will quickly turn on you, and they'll just stop responding to your trade offers, or they'll see it come through and they'll just be like, oh great, here it comes, another
Right.
trade offer from so and so.
Yeah, here comes Joey Bag of Donuts. Yeah, get out of here. I'm ignoring it. Rule number 4: buy low, sell high. Seems simple, but this is one of the most overlooked rules in trade. People buy players that have already their best games behind them. Perfect example, last year, I traded Michael Thomas in week 5. He had an awesome first start of that season, but he played some really easy opponents, and Mark Ingram wasn't there anymore. I knew that Mark Ingram was coming back. I knew that would affect his numbers slightly, and funny enough, all the great things that he did in the first 4 games, he only did those things one other time throughout the rest of the season. Even though his numbers were still great and he was a good receiver, I wound up getting a top flight running back for Michael Thomas, and I went wide receiver heavy. So you gotta buy low, sell high. Other than that, you just gotta really know the trends. You gotta know both sides of the trades, like future matchups. So who are your guys playing? Playoffs, when is your bye week? All that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, it's sticking with the Saints there. It's Alvin Kamara, the same thing. He averaged 34 points per game when Ingram was out of the lineup for that first month of the season. And after that, he was still solid. He was still averaging right around 20 points a game. But if you try, you could have probably traded him. Now, there's only maybe 2 players I would have traded him for, Barkley or Christian McCaffrey. I actually didn't own any Alvin Kamara last year, unfortunately. You probably could have got like a DeAndre Hopkins plus, Christian McCaffrey after the first month of the season for him, So you got to know when to take advantage of those things.